the keys, I said. Take the whole car. I said it quietly in my head, watching my mother slide my brother's overnight bag into the back seat of my car like she owned it. Like she owned everything in this driveway, including me. She didn't hear me. She never did. Let me back up. I'm 31 years old. I work as a compliance analyst at a mid-sized insurance firm in Columbus, Ohio. I have a 401k, a savings account I actually contribute to, and a 2023 Acura MDX I bought myself after 3 years of brown bagging lunch and skipping every vacation my coworkers took to Cancun. My brother is 34. He has none of those things. What he does have, my parents' basement, my father's old truck, which hasn't started since 2021, a rotating cast of schemes that never quite pan out, and my mother's absolute unconditional devotion. The kind of devotion that turns a grown man into a permanent child and turns a daughter into a piece of furniture, useful when needed, invisible otherwise. I moved back home 8 months ago. That was my first mistake, but it felt like the responsible thing at the time. My lease ended, I was between apartments, and my mother said it would just be a few months. Just until you find something you love. We miss you. It'll be nice. She made pot roast the first weekend. My brother ate most of it and said nothing. Within 3 weeks, I understood the arrangement. My car became the family car. Not officially, not in any conversation that actually happened, but my mother would say things like, "Can your brother borrow your car Saturday? He has a thing." Or, "I told him he could use it for the weekend, just the weekend." Or my personal favorite, "It's just sitting there." I said no when I could. I said no when I had the energy to fight about it and the time to deal with the sulk that followed. My mother is a master of the slow withdrawal. She doesn't yell. She just becomes slightly less warm. The coffee she makes in the morning somehow doesn't include a cup for you. She answers your questions one word shorter than usual. It's a pressure system, low and constant. Most people don't even notice they're adjusting to it until they've completely changed shape. I noticed. I just didn't know what to do about it yet. My brother's name isn't important. In this house, he was the son, and I was the other one. Those were our real names. He's not a bad person in the dramatic way. Bad people are bad in movies. He's bad the way bad weather is bad, not malicious, just relentless. He'd borrow things and return them broken and not mention it. He'd eat the groceries I bought for myself and leave the empty container in the fridge. He'd make plans involving my schedule without asking and then act confused when I was upset, like I was the one who'd introduced chaos into an otherwise peaceful situation. But the car was different. The car was the line. I'd drawn that line 6 different times in 8 months. 6 conversations that went nowhere. 6 times my mother said, "I understand," with her mouth, and "You're being difficult," with everything else. 6 times my brother shrugged and said he got it and then asked again 2 weeks later like the previous conversation had never happened. By November, I had started parking further down the street. Childish maybe, but effective. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Tuesday. I know it was a Tuesday because I had an early call Wednesday morning, 7:30, with a team in our Atlanta office, and I'd set 3 alarms and gone to bed at 10, which for me is practically ascetic. I'd had a long day, the kind where you sit at a desk for 9 hours and somehow end your last meeting more confused than when you started. I wanted sleep. I needed sleep. At 12:47 in the morning, I heard voices downstairs. Not quiet voices, not the sound of someone getting water or letting the dog out. These were conversation voices, my mother's particular high-pitched urgency and my brother's low negotiation tone, the one he uses when he wants something and is working out the angles. I lay still and listened. "She's asleep," my mother said. "She won't even know," my brother said. "What about your registration?" "That's what I'm saying. I need to be there before 8 or they close the window. The DMV only does walk-ins until 8. I can't wait." A pause. "The keys are on the hook," my mother said. I was out of bed before she finished the sentence. I stood at the top of the stairs in the dark, not moving, just listening to the specific sound of my mother unhooking my car keys from the rack by the garage door. The small metallic jingle of it, casual as anything, like she was grabbing her own keys, like this was a normal thing that normal people did in normal houses. I didn't go downstairs. I went to my dresser. 3 months earlier, after the fourth conversation that went nowhere, I had made a decision. I drove to the dealership where I bought the car and paid $62 for a second key fob. I kept the original on the hook by the garage because if I hid it, my mother would ask why, and I'd have to explain and it would become a whole thing. But the second fob, the backup, I kept in the back of my underwear drawer inside a folded wool sock. I took it out. I went back to the top of the stairs. I waited until I heard the garage door open, until I heard the sound of my mother presumably helping my brother get into a car she believed was mine. The Acura, the one with the hook fob. Then I went downstairs. My mother drives a 2022 Subaru Forester, dark green. She parks it in the garage, which is where my brother clearly expected my Acura to be, but I had moved my car 2 days earlier. I'd gotten paranoid after a conversation I'd overheard about my brother needing to figure out the car situation for some undisclosed thing next week. I had parked my Acura down the block and told no one. So what was in the garage and the spot where my car usually lived? My mother's Subaru. And apparently, in the dark, at nearly 1 a.m, my brother had not noticed the difference. Or my mother hadn't, or neither of them had bothered to check. Because why would you check when you're just taking something that isn't yours? I stood in the dark kitchen and I listened to my mother's car back out of the driveway. I could have run out. I could have knocked on the window, said, "Wait, that's the wrong car. This is a mistake." I didn't. I thought about 6 conversations. I thought about the low coffee pressure and the empty containers in the fridge and the way my mother had said the keys are on the hook, like my property was a communal resource. I thought about 7:30 Atlanta call and 3 alarms and the fact that I had not been consulted, not even for a second. I went back upstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed. I watched the red glow of my phone on the nightstand and I waited. At 2004 a.m., my mother called me. I let it ring 4 times, not to be dramatic, just because I needed to be fully awake and fully calm before I answered. This was not a moment for sleep voice and confusion. "Hello." "There's been an accident." Her voice was strange, tight and high and not quite right. "Your brother is fine. He's fine." But there was a situation with the car. "Which car?" A pause. "Your car," she said, and I heard the uncertainty in it, the fraction of a second where she was already not sure she was right. "My car is parked on Fenwick Street," I said. 2 blocks down. I moved it Sunday." Silence. "Then what car did he—" She stopped. I didn't fill it in for her. I let her do the math, in her own head, in real time, with me on the phone, so she could hear herself doing it. "Oh God," she said. "Is your car okay?" Another silence, longer this time. "There was ice on the bridge on Route 9, she said. "He went off the shoulder. The car, the airbags deployed. The tow truck driver said it might be totaled." Her Subaru Forester, the one she'd driven for 3 years, the one she'd named Greta without quite admitting she'd named it, the one with the National Park sticker on the back from a road trip she and my dad took before everything got complicated. Totaled? I felt something. Not satisfaction exactly. More like the specific relief of a pressure system finally breaking. The storm you'd been tracking for weeks had finally just hit, right on schedule, exactly where the models said it would. "Is my brother hurt?" I asked. "He's shaken up. There was a guardrail. He's okay. But—" "That's good," I said. "I'm glad he's not hurt." "We need to talk about—" "Mom," I said, "it's almost 2 a.m. I have a call at 7:30. I'm going to go back to sleep." "You're going to your father and I?" "Good night," I said. I hung up. I put my phone face down on the nightstand. I went to sleep. I want to be honest here. I slept fine. I know that might make me sound like a cold person. But I had spent 8 months being slowly drained by people who could not find a single night of sleep to lose over anything they did to me. My brother didn't lose sleep when he returned my car with a quarter tank and a coffee stain on the passenger seat he'd never mentioned. My mother didn't lose sleep after any of the 6 conversations. You reach a point where the guilt about not feeling guilty is just another weight you decide to put down. I was up at 6:50. I made my own coffee. I had my 7:30 call. I did not mention that anything unusual had happened the night before because nothing unusual had happened to me. My car was fine. I was fine. The chaos was down the hall. I could hear it through the floor while I was on my call, the low murmur of my parents talking, the specific frequency of my mother's voice when she is managing a crisis. I kept my door closed and my headphones in, and I did my job. The confrontation came at 9:15 when I went downstairs to refill my coffee. My mother was at the kitchen table. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her face had that particular worn quality that I'd always associated with my brother's worst years, the DUI at 26, the failed business at 29, the months-long stretch where she'd driven 40 minutes each way to bring him groceries because he couldn't, for reasons that were never quite articulated, leave his apartment. My father was standing at the counter. He looked at the floor when I came in. "We need to talk," my mother said. "Okay," I said. I poured my coffee. I sat down across from her. "Your brother could have been seriously hurt?" "I know. I'm glad he wasn't. He took what he thought was your car. He took your car without either of your permission, as far as I understand." She blinked. He thought it was mine," I said, "which would mean he was taking my car without my permission, and he took yours without yours. Either way, he took a car that didn't belong to him in the middle of the night." "You moved your car on purpose." I looked at her. I parked my car on a public street. I'm not aware that I need to announce my parking decisions in advance. "Don't do that," she said. "Don't be lawyerly." "Mom, I'm a compliance analyst. Being precise is literally my job." My father made a small sound, not quite a laugh. "I don't think he meant for it to happen." "The point," my mother said, and her voice was getting tighter now, climbing toward something, "is that you knew. You knew what was going to happen, and you did nothing." "I knew someone was taking a car from our garage. I didn't know whose car it was. Did you?" She opened her mouth, closed it. "You handed him the keys in the dark," I said. "You thought they were my keys, but you didn't check. You didn't come upstairs and ask me. You just decided that my property was available at 1 in the morning because that's how it's always worked in this house, and I want you to think about that." Silence. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car went by. "What are you saying?" my mother said. "I'm saying that your car is totaled, and that is genuinely terrible, and I'm sorry that it happened. And I'm also saying that the keys to my car were taken off a hook in my family home by members of my family, without waking me up, without asking me, without a single second of consideration for whether I might need my car or want my car, or simply prefer that my property not be loaned out in the middle of the night. That's not fair." "You're right," I said. "It's not." I picked up my coffee and went back upstairs. Here's what I had known for a while that I had not yet told my mother. I was leaving. Not in the vague, someday way I'd been leaving for 8 months. I mean leaving. I'd signed a lease on an apartment in Clintonville 3 weeks earlier. First and last month's deposit paid, move-in date December 15th, which was exactly 4 weeks away from that Tuesday morning. I hadn't told my parents because I'd wanted to be sure. I'd wanted to have everything confirmed and locked before I said anything, because I knew that saying it out loud in this house would immediately transform it into a negotiation, a guilt trip, a production. And I didn't have the energy for any of that while I was in the middle of arranging movers and utility transfers and updating my renter's insurance. I also, I'll admit, had a small, uncharitable part of me that wanted to wait until I was absolutely ready to leave before I said a word. Because in this house, information was a resource. If you gave it too early, it got used against you. I told them at dinner that Thursday. My father took it quietly. He nodded and said it sounded like a good place and asked about the commute. My mother put her fork down and said, "Is this because of the car?" "I've been planning this for months," I said. "I signed the lease before any of this happened." "You should have told us." "I'm telling you now. You're abandoning your family when we're already dealing with." "Mom." I kept my voice very even. "I'm 31. Getting my own apartment is not abandonment. It's called being an adult." She said nothing for the rest of dinner. The pressure system moved back in. The temperature in the room dropped 3 degrees. I ate my food and thought about Clintonville. The insurance conversation happened the following Monday. My brother did not have a valid license. I learned this, somehow, only in the aftermath of the accident. He'd had a minor lapse situation with his renewal and had been meaning to deal with it, but hadn't gotten around to it yet, which apparently was the reason he'd needed to go to the DMV at 7 in the morning and the reason the whole chain of events had started. My mother's insurance company was unsurprisingly complicated about this. An unlicensed driver operating a vehicle without the owner's explicit consent in the middle of the night. The adjuster my mother spoke to used the phrase irregular circumstances 4 times in one call, which I know because she relayed the whole conversation to me verbatim afterward, looking for, I think, some sympathy, some joining of forces. A mother-daughter moment of grieving together over the difficult complexity of insurance bureaucracy. "What did your attorney say?" I asked. She looked at me. "What attorney?" "You might want to talk to one," I said, "just to understand your options." "We can't afford an attorney right now. Do you know how much the rental car alone is costing us?" I thought about my 401k. I thought about 3 years of brown bag lunches. I thought about $62 and a spare key fob in a wool sock. "I'll help you find someone who does free consultations," I said. "There are a few who specialize in insurance disputes. I can send you some names." I did, that afternoon. 3 names with links to their websites and notes on which one had the best reviews for exactly this kind of claim. I helped from a distance. I did not absorb the crisis into my body like I was used to doing. I handed them tools and let them build. December 15th came on a Sunday, which felt appropriate. I was up at 7. The movers arrived at 8:30, 2 guys named Cliff and somebody whose name I never quite caught, but who had impressive forearms and a very efficient system with furniture blankets. My mother watched from the doorway of the house while they loaded my bed frame. She had the look she gets when she is not going to say the thing she is thinking because the thing she is thinking is too large, and she doesn't have the right words for it, and she knows on some level that saying it wrong will only make it worse. I hugged her before I got in my car. It was a long hug, the kind where you hold on an extra second past the natural end point, where you're both just breathing for a moment. "Call me when you're settled," she said. "I will," I said. She pulled back and looked at me. Something complicated moved across her face. Not an apology. She would never quite get there, not in words, but something adjacent to it, something that understood. "You could have just told him no," she said. "Earlier, any of the times." "I tried," I said. She nodded. She knew. I drove to Clintonville. I parked in my own space in my own lot with my name on the lease and my key fob, both of them in my jacket pocket. My brother called that night. First time he'd called me directly in months. "Hey," he said. "Hey." A pause. "The insurance thing is kind of a mess." "Yeah, I heard." "Mom's kind of a mess." "She'll be okay." Another pause. Longer. The kind of silence that has things in it. Things that won't get said, at least not tonight, maybe not ever in quite the right words, but things that both parties know are there. "I didn't know it was her car," he said. "I want you to know that." "I know." I wasn't trying to." "I know," I said again. And I did know. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He never was. That was almost the whole problem in a way. The damage he left behind was never intentional. It was just permanent. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm going to get my license sorted. Like, actually this time." "That's good," I said. and I was thinking about looking into a trade program. There's a HVAC certification thing at Columbus State, 14 months. I didn't say anything for a moment. That sounds like a real plan, I said. Yeah, a small sound, not quite a laugh, better late than never. Call me when you start, I said. We hung up. I sat in my new apartment with boxes around me that I hadn't opened yet, and I thought about my brother at 34, finally running out of places to land that weren't of his own making. I thought about my mother standing in the doorway watching a moving truck, understanding something about the difference between loving someone and consuming them. I thought about a spare key fob in a wool sock and $62 and the decision I'd made 3 months earlier, quietly, without announcing it, without making a speech about it, without waiting for anyone's permission. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't threatened, I hadn't sent the long text I drafted and deleted 4 separate times at midnight. I just made sure my car was somewhere else. Some people wait for the moment to defend themselves. I'd learned in 31 years living adjacent to this family's particular gravitational pull that the better move was to simply step out of the orbit. Let the debris find its own trajectory. I made myself tea in my own kitchen in my own apartment, with no one's cups to count but mine. I didn't feel nothing. I want to be clear about that. I felt tired and a little sad, and underneath both of those things, the specific, quiet satisfaction of a woman who had made a decision and followed through on it. Not loudly, not dramatically, just steadily, the way water moves, the way pressure builds, the way some things only break when they've finally been left entirely to themselves. I went to bed at 10:15. I slept like I'd earned it. Because I had. I've thought a lot about what kind of person I was before that Tuesday night and what kind of person I became after it. Not dramatically, not in the way people describe turning points in movies, where there's music and slow motion and a clear before and after. It was quieter than that. It was $62 and a spare key fob and a wool sock. It was parking my car 2 blocks away and telling no one. It was lying in bed in the dark at 12:47 in the morning, listening to my mother unhook what she thought were my keys and making the choice, a real choice, not a reaction, to do nothing. That choice came from somewhere I'd had to build deliberately, over a long time, out of materials no one handed me. The first thing I had to build was a sense of what was actually right, not what was comfortable, not what kept the peace, not what made my mother's face do the warm thing instead of the cold thing. I mean a genuine internal compass, the kind that tells you when something is wrong even when everyone around you is treating it as normal. For years, I had let that compass get overridden by the family system. The system said, the son needs help, the daughter provides it. The system said, keeping everyone calm is the same as being a good person. It took a long time to understand that those two things are not the same at all. Absorbing damage quietly is not virtue. Sometimes it's just a slow way of teaching people that damage has no cost. The second thing I had to build was the willingness to think clearly when emotions were loudest. My brother's situation was genuinely hard in some ways. My mother loved him in the real, exhausting, irrational way that parents love the child they're most afraid for. None of that was fake. But love, even real love, doesn't make an action right. I had to learn to hold both things at once. I understand why you did this, and it was still wrong. I can feel sorry for your situation, and I am still not the solution to it. Keeping those two things separate, not letting sympathy collapse into compliance, was probably the hardest thinking I've ever had to do. The third thing was simpler to name and harder to practice. I had to keep going when it wasn't dramatic enough to feel heroic. Moving my car wasn't a moment. Signing a lease in secret wasn't a moment. Paying $62 for a spare fob was not a moment. None of it felt like strength in real time. It felt like maintenance, like quietly fixing a leak that no one else would acknowledge was there. But that's what follow-through actually looks like. Not one big stand, but 100 small decisions made consistently in the direction of your own life. My brother called me the night I moved out and said he was thinking about the HVAC certification program at Columbus State. 14 months. I told him that sounded like a real plan, and I meant it. I hope he does it. I hope my mother figures out the insurance and gets a new car and eventually understands, without me having to spell it out, what happened and why. I'm not holding my breath. But I'm not closing the door either. What I know is this: the people in that house didn't change because I yelled at them. They didn't change because I sent the long text I drafted and deleted 4 times at midnight. They may have started changing slowly, slightly, because the system finally ran into its own consequences with no one left to absorb the cost. That's not revenge. That's just cause and effect moving at its own speed, which is almost always slower than you want and more thorough than you expect. I made myself tea in my own kitchen that first night in Clintonville, and I thought, this is what I was working toward. Not the drama, not the totaled car or the insurance calls or the confrontation at the kitchen table. Just this: a quiet room that belongs to me, a cup of tea I made for myself, and the specific piece of a person who did the right thing in the right way and then left the rest to sort itself out. Some things only get fixed when you stop fixing them. I'm still learning how true that is.